Are you all ready to join me today in our trip to outer space?
Come along quietly or not.
I will talk to you of art. For there is nothing else. Some artist made a hook. Yes. Let you bite upon it.
Classy. And now, without further ado,
I'm like, wow, that's terrible. That's funny. Okay, I got one for you.
Hello, folks. This is Albert Shivers. Welcome to another episode of the Planet Shivers podcast. Before we get to the episode, just want to let you guys know 4 brand new of my large pieces of art will be at the Gamut Art Gallery from April 3rd to June 22nd. The opening is April 3rd from 6 to 8 p.m. And if you could make it out, you can find all the information online at Gamut Art Gallery or on their Facebook page or Instagram page. On this episode today, I'm excited for this one. Luke and Andrew are back, along with my buddy Isaac, to talk classic comedy movies. Okay? We cover everything from Abbott and Costello to the Marx Brothers to new comedies compared to old comedies, and how political correctness may be hurting comedy movies as we move forward. This was such a fun episode. I would say of the Luke and Andrew episodes, and there's been a good bit, this one is my favorite. And that's no shame on the other ones. It's always great to have close friends on the podcast because I feel like the conversation just explodes. It flows, and it's always so smooth. And I love having these guys on. And I think a comedy podcast is perfect. I don't know about you. Spring has been hitting me real weird this year. And there's a lot of weirdness in the air. So enjoy this comedy podcast. Because not only do we talk about comedy, but it gets funny at some moments, I think. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And thanks again for Luke and Andrew for coming on the show. It was so much fun to sit down with my buddies and talk about stuff we're interested in. Enjoy. Alright folks, it's another episode of the Planet Shivers podcast. I am always Albert Shivers, and we got Isaac here.
How's it going?
And joining us today once again is the incomparable Luke and Andrew. Thank you guys for doing the show again.
Of course. Yeah.
So today we are going to cover comedy films. And we're going to start out by comparing and contrasting contemporary comedy films with old comedy films. And I'd like to start off this conversation. I just seen a comedy I had not seen before. With Isaac, we watched The Party with Peter Sellers.
Peter Sellers, yeah.
And I had never seen it before. And it was a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. That's one that I haven't seen it like all the way through, but from what I see, I think it's considered in high regard.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of if I've heard of it. Is that the one where he plays like a clumsy Indian actor?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I caught like the beginning of that once, but I didn't get to finish the entire film for whatever reason. But yeah, I would like to see it.
Yeah.
It goes off the rails.
I'll have to. That's another one I'll have to find and watch all the way through.
Yeah. And I'm going to bring it back up towards the end as we go. But so in terms of old comedy or classic comedy, for you guys, who do you guys gravitate towards? Who comes to mind first?
Definitely Abbott and Costello and Laurel and Hardy because we take after them. From the silent era, there's definitely Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin.
Fatty Arbuckle.
Yeah.
He was a big influence too on Buster Keaton and those,
Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah.
I think he basically trained them.
Yeah, he mentored them.
Yeah. And now Fatty Arbuckle, he had like towards the end of his career, didn't he have like a lot of like drama
Oh
surrounding him?
yeah. He had a bunch of lawsuits and I think
He was exonerated eventually because he was innocent, but by that point the damage had already been done. So he
damaged his reputation. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
And of course, the Marx Brothers.
Marx Brothers, the Three Stooges.
Three Stooges.
All these guys that we really wish had worked together at some point, but probably because they were working for rival studios and what have you, it just didn't happen.
And we talk about women in comedy. We gotta say Lucille Ball.
Yes.
Who was a legend. She and Desi Arnaz. They did great work. She really kind of, the great one, Jackie Gleason. You gotta bring him up. And all these, all these teams. That's something that you don't really get to see nowadays.
Every time you see like a buddy comedy movie these days, it's usually a one-off thing. Like you rarely. I think very sadly the closest thing we have to a buddy comedy team these days is John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell, and I think every time they work together, it's one of like the worst comedies. Like that new Sherlock movie that came out last.
I think it actually got taken out of theaters because people hated it so much.
Yeah, like it was like the most walked out movie of the year.
Yeah.
So what do you guys feel through your taste is the problem with those? In terms of comparing it to what you like in comedy, because comedy is naturally it's very subjective.
Yes,
and we all have different tastes. So for you guys, what is it about those newer?
Well, since it is subjective, I can't speak for other people, but personally, I think I gravitate toward comedy that makes me feel smart when I get the joke. Okay. If I'm watching a joke and I think, a 2-year-old could have thought that up, then I'm probably not going to laugh at it. But if everything is carefully timed out and you don't quite see it coming, and there's that element of surprise, even if it's a joke that you've heard before, but they manage to add just enough freshness to it in the delivery and the setup and everything, I think that makes it that will help it get a laugh. I was thinking of an example of the Looney Tunes. You would think, because they were mostly slapstick comedy, you would think that slapstick comedy would be the easiest comedy because it's just watching people get hurt with sound effects accompaniment. But even the people who mastered the Looney Tunes had trouble getting the formula just right. Like Chuck Jones, who's one of the greatest Looney Tunes directors of all time, did hundreds of Looney Tune episodes where you laugh out loud even when you're watching the episodes, even when you've seen them until you have them memorized backwards. On YouTube, a couple of weeks ago, I found a Looney Tune episode from like the early 80s that I had never seen before. It's kind of like a riff on Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court. Bugs Bunny accidentally travels in time to King Arthur's Court, but it's I think Daffy Duck is King Arthur, Yosemite Sam is Merlin, and one of the knights is Elmer Fudd. So again, it's Chuck Jones, it's Mel Blanc doing the voices, but I found it surprisingly flat. It's like, even though it's doing all these jokes like like jousting contests and people yelling at each other and people falling into the water during the jousting contest, and you're thinking, I should be laughing at it, but somehow the animation and the voice acting and the directing, it all seems lethargic and tired. It just doesn't have the same energy and liveliness to it that the old stuff has. Like, it feels like they're just repeating what they've done before, but not trying to liven it up and make it feel fresh in spite of itself. Mm-hmm. And I think, so taking it back to modern stuff like, Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly, when they do their jokes, they're, just going from what I've seen from the previews, because I refuse to actually watch their movies together because the previews kind of scare me away. Their jokes look like I've seen that a million times. I don't think it took more than a single brain cell to even think it up, and so I feel insulted more than amused by it. Like, you really couldn't put more effort into it. The same rule applies to comedy as drama. The more effort you put into it, the better it turns out.
So, with that said, not to keep throwing curveballs at you guys, but this is interesting to me. Because there really is no right or wrong answer to any of this.
Of course.
Yeah. So if we were to raise hell, and if we were to say, let's take John C. Reilly and
Will
Ferrell, and compare and contrast them to Abbott and Costello. So just to put them under this microscope, I'm not super familiar with Abbott and Costello.
Okay.
I'm more familiar with Marx Brothers, Three Stooges growing up. So for you guys who are big fans of Abbott and Costello, what is it that they have that works for you that is lacking with the newer comedies and newer comedy groups? What is it? Do you know what that element is? Or is it just as easily unexplainable? Which is also completely understandable.
Well, it was a lot of it was, those teams, a lot of them were just, everybody thinks Abbott and Costello were friends growing up, or that they'd known each other for years. They hooked up they decided to become a team at Burlesque. Okay. They were an act in a burlesque show,
right?
Yeah. And they hooked up by accident because Abbott was an emergency replacement for the straight guy who was supposed to be working
with Costello. Yeah, and they just had that natural chemistry. Mm-hmm. So that's what I think works so well is and timing. Right. Timing, I think, is the biggest thing. Because I'm not. Because you see other things that John C. Reilly did, and he's a really great dramatic actor. He's done movies with Martin Scorsese, Gangs of New York, Chicago, The Perfect Storm, and Will Ferrell can do. He was on Saturday Night Live for years, but just once Abbott and Costello got together, they just meshed so perfectly. They knew each other's strengths and weaknesses, right. And they knew what each other could do, and they just flowed.
Right.
They just went perfectly together. They didn't have to depend on throwing up or peeing your pants
or pop cultural references that would get very dated over time.
Yeah, that's true.
And none of their stuff, I wouldn't consider any of their stuff parody.
Yeah.
They did Meet Frankenstein or Meet the Invisible Man, but they're always just they didn't one of them didn't play Dr. Frankenstein and the other one played Igor. Or no, Igor. Sorry, thinking Young Frankenstein.
Mel Brooks.
And you're right, because even though in a way they seem like parody, at the same time they were still the overall film was still so dignified that it still worked as a serious entry to the rest of the the movies.
Oh yeah, I mean you take they're pretty much the comedy of that. I mean, if you took them out of Frankenstein, it would be just another Frankenstein movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because you brought that made me think of another element, especially when it comes to parody. Respecting the source material. Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein works because of how well it still feels like a serious Frankenstein movie with Abbott and Costello in it. Yeah. Whereas with John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell in that Sherlock movie, it just feels like, oh, we're just going to take a whole bunch of modern jokes and put them in
Shakespearean
Sherlock Holmes. In Sherlock Holmes, and just hope that it works. And it's like, none of these jokes feel like they have any relevance to the source material. So that there's that level, that respect is gone. So it doesn't feel like it would work as a serious Sherlock Holmes adaptation or as a comedy.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like, to me, as we're talking about this, I'm like picking up two things. First of all, that it sounds as though the old comedies definitely had more room to breathe and more room to grow. So it didn't have the modern Hollywood breathing down its neck.
Yeah,
it was a little bit more free and easy. And so we rattled off a bunch of different comedy teams and comedians. And I think it also, like, you have to like someone to help to find them funny.
Yes.
So in other words, if I love Richard Pryor and you don't, you're gonna go in not ready to laugh, where I'm gonna be way more open. And I feel like Abbot Costello, Marx Brothers, Stooges, Laurel and Hardy, all the way back to Chaplin and Keaton, like, people liked them.
Yes.
They liked those characters.
Yeah.
They were, on some level or another, relatable, whether you felt it within you or you knew someone that reminded you of that. Yeah. And it also, like, most of those guys came from, like you said, vaudeville and stage, where there was not the safety net of anything. Like, to come from that live audience background, and when you're feeling comedy like that live, it isn't a couple of key grips laughing.
Yeah,
it's an audience.
It's an audience. Yeah.
And I'm sure that had a lot to do with things like the Marx Brothers. Later on, when they switched to MGM, they would, their producer would bring them to theaters, and there would be a couple of scenes in each movie that they would work out on stage.
Yeah.
So, and one example, have you guys seen Day at the Races?
Parts of it.
Yeah. We're like, so there's the very popular scene where Chico has a peanut wagon.
Okay.
And Groucho's looking to bet on a horse, and Chico keeps selling him, like, all these books about which horses to bet on and which jockeys and all these things. And by the end of it, Groucho has this huge pile of books, and he has no money left to bet. So that whole scene, they would, before they filmed it, they would work it out on stage in front of live audiences for a couple of months. They'd get the timing down, and then they just recreate it. They'd even keep the stage, just okay, cameras, and that would be it. So the methodology behind it seems like it was a little more thought out.
Oh yeah.
The effort.
Yeah.
So, and again, you just reminded me of something else when you talk about liking the guys. I've recently watched some old comedies that are held in very high regard that I wasn't as impressed with. Over Christmas vacation, I finally saw National Lampoon's Animal House, which I had never seen, and I know it's considered one of the best comedies of all time. I actually wasn't that impressed, namely because I didn't find the main characters to be all that likable, so I wasn't really rooting for them or anything. Right. And another one, I finally, shortly before the the cinemas were closed down again, I had the chance to finally see the Blues Brothers, which was shown for a one-day special at Cinemark. And I did think it was pretty funny, but there was one scene in particular, and this again ties into atmosphere and the overall film and how that can affect whether or not a joke within the 2-hour runtime of a movie will work or fall flat. There's this scene where Carrie Fisher's character finally catches up to them, and she's yelling at John Belushi's character for leaving her standing at the altar, and he's using every lie in the book. Well, I got a flat tire, there was a traffic jam, and it's like, okay, the guy's obviously lying, but then he kisses her and throws her on the ground, and then he and Dan Aykroyd run. And it's like, now, from an analytical, non-comedic standpoint, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I feel like there's a huge unanswered question here. Did he leave her standing at the altar because he's a jerk? Because if he did, then I don't want him... I'm not rooting for him anymore. I mean, I still want him to save the orphanage, but I don't want him to win. I want her to get him. If he left her at the altar because she was always crazy and, you know... And they explained that she was always crazy and he just didn't know how to break off the relationship safely and he just ran. That would be hilarious, and I would, I would be laughing at her all the more. But because the movie doesn't answer that question, it's like I don't feel like laughing now because I need more information here. So again, atmosphere and effort and methodology, putting it all together, just how much it can affect one joke in the scheme of things.
I just like to chime in with the Blues Brothers for like a second. And just there's a little extra special reason why I like that movie and will want to support it is John Lee Hooker and Cab Calloway. Their inclusion, them putting those two guys in there, like Ray Charles, everybody knew. Yeah. Everybody knew Aretha, but putting in those two guys who were of the older generation, most likely were either unknown or, in Cab Calloway's case, forgotten about, other than Minnie the Moocher. Yeah. I appreciate when a film or actors or comedians, any artist, is able to reach back and either help out or pay homage to who's come before. And I loved seeing Cab Calloway in that movie. So that's all I wanted to say. Go on.
And I just want to chime in again about the Blues Brothers as well. Is why, because watching that movie, that the first time I saw it, I wasn't familiar with like blues music, like those type of songs, so that gave me appreciation for that type of music, and just the fact you see these two guys, Carrie Fisher blows up their building, and they just pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and just walk away. She shoots a bazooka at their while they're on in a phone booth. Yeah, it goes up in the air, crashes, and they say, "Oh, there's like $10 in change here.
We're on a mission from God."
I guess
some of the jokes really did land, and I did think overall the movie was pretty funny. Yeah. But there were some jokes that left me like, I feel like they missed an opportunity there.
Yeah, and the fact that you never, until except for that one moment, where he's doing all that stuff with Carrie Fisher, and that's the only time you see his eyes in the whole movie. And and going back to National Lampoon's Animal House, a lot of those guys are, jerks. They're, but just John Belushi's whole thing, like going through a lunch line and just picking at to the tune of I don't know much about history, and it's like he's doing like a food ballet, and then the whole food fight, and the fact that he was probably next to Donald Sutherland, from Saturday Night Live, he was probably the biggest actor in that movie, and his dialogue is very minimal.
Yeah.
All right. So on the topic of National Lampoon's Animal House, let's go in this direction of. So that's probably the biggest movie in the National Lampoon's series, but National Lampoon's continue to make movies.
Yeah.
Almost up to very recently. So modern comedies rely on a lot more, I would say, like cheaper, quicker, less fulfilling laughs. And it's evolved into, I don't know, like, was American Pie wasn't a National Lampoon movie?
Oh no.
Probably the same style, though. Probably.
Right. That's kind of what I'm getting at here.
There was
new style.
National Lampoon's Animal House. There was Revenge of the Nerds.
Right.
American Pie. But I'm The last National Lampoon's movie, they did National Lampoon's Van Wilder. I don't know if you with Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one.
That was kind of before he did Deadpool and stuff. That was one of his first driving, leading roles. Then there was National Lampoon's Going the Distance. That was the last newer one that I remember seeing. It was they did all the filming for that in Canada.
Well, just as you guys were talking, I got all their films.
Okay.
So there's far more here than I thought. So the original National Lampoon's Company. My rallies off like an auctioneer. You got Animal House, Class Reunion, Movie Madness, Vacation, European Vacation, and Christmas Vacation. Then they merged with another company, and every one of these start off with National Lampoon's.
Yeah.
I'm just not putting that in. You got Loaded Weapon, Senior Trip, Vegas Vacation, Golf Punks, Van Wilder, Blackball, and Jake's Booty Call. Then, they're just going to keep on going here. Then it changed to National Lampoon, Inc. And we were given Gold Diggers, Dorm Days, Barely Legal, Going the Distance, The Almost Guys, Adam and Eve, Cattle Call, Quest for Festeroo, Pucked, The Rise of Taj, Stone Age, Totally Baked, Bag Boy, One Too Many, Robodoc, Transylmania, Endless Bummer, Cheerleaders Must Die, Dirty Movie, Frat Chance, dumbasses. I laughed, but still. They go on, but I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah.
They made a lot of movies. That's the point. So let's jump over to the Marx Brothers before we get too far.
Sure.
Thoughts?
Well, okay. Unfortunately, I'm not as versed with the Marx Brothers as you are, although I have seen Night at the Opera and parts of their other work. I definitely think they definitely nailed slapstick comedy and verbal comedy. I think they pretty much had the best of both worlds, and also Groucho Marx. In terms of wit and improvisation, was like the Robin Williams of his time.
Yeah.
And he definitely pushed the envelope for political correctness. I know this. He didn't do this in any movie, but he also hosted that show. This Is Your Life.
To Bet Your Life.
To Bet Your Life.
Yeah.
And I've heard this story from a friend, Marty Courtney. Apparently, there was a time he was hosting the show and he was interviewing a guest who said he had like 12 children or something like that, and the guy's like, how'd you get that many kids? And the guy's, well, my wife really loves me, and Groucho replied, well, I really love my cigar, but I take it out sometimes.
Right.
and because it was filmed live, they couldn't edit it out. Right. So I do think but even when he was pushing the envelope for political correctness, he was still putting effort into it, even when this stuff was flying off the cuff. He wasn't just going for the cheap laugh. He was like, everybody else is thinking this. I probably, if I don't say it, I'll look like an idiot.
Yeah, and that that game, that was just a game show. Yeah, and it was just a stage for Groucho Marx.
Yes,
because if you watch it, they put out a little DVD set of the best episodes, and if you watch it, the game show itself is not only minimal but very simplistic. You get paired up with a random person. There's a couple of questions, and they get a little bit harder, and they're general knowledge questions, geography, film knowledge, pop culture of the time. Very basic. And then, you answer those, and, the more you answer, the better you do. But it was such a small part. You tuned in to just watch Groucho roast, both of his guests.
Yes.
You know, whether it was, you know, a guy with like a funny situation or a pretty girl that they'd throw on there and have Groucho, you know, flirt with. And that was it. And as the show went on, the producers would just try to find more outlandish people to just throw at Groucho, and they wouldn't tell Groucho Marx anything. And if there was something, like if they knew, like, okay, this guy had 12 kids, so the producers knew. And what they would do is they'd have chalkboards, and they'd tell, like, if Groucho wasn't going in the right direction to get those answers they wanted him to get, they would like ask him about his kids, you know, behind the scenes to guide Groucho into like the funny answers.
So they were counting on the political incorrectness, basically.
They were, you know, they they'd worry about the censors later, and they did what they're on YouTube.
Yeah,
they would put together like stag reels of the things that definitely couldn't make it to air. Which was all just double entendres and things.
Of course.
And they'd put these stag reels together and play them at like the Christmas parties of the times when like Groucho went a little too far. But yeah, like that, it really was just the perfect showcase for him to just run wild. So there were 5 brothers.
Yes.
And I'll name them.
I want to see if I can. So there's Groucho, Chico,
Hong Kong.
Harpo. Yeah. Who's the beautiful? How do I forget that? Gummo.
Oh, okay. That was the one I didn't think you guys would get. I'm impressed.
And Zeppo.
Okay.
Yeah. Fun fact: I actually know Gummo because that was actually a line in a one act that I did at Shawnee years ago. Hey, where I play a disgruntled librarian. Name the 4 Marx Brothers. Zeppo, Gummo. Everybody misses that.
And so Gummo was in the act originally.
Okay.
And then the war happened.
Okay.
And somebody had to be sacrificed. It still exists today, but it's more so back then that it was implemented where a mother during a draft could fight to say, hey, I have so many sons and I don't want to risk losing all my sons. So the draft would only take 1 or take 2, depending. So they sort of like sacrificed Gummo and said, "You're the least funny, so you go to war, and the other 4 will just stay." And Zeppo was the youngest, and according to the other 3 brothers, the funniest, but never got that opportunity.
Oh man!
Because from what I understand, I don't know how, I don't know the sources and everything. So you had the 4 brothers, and when they started to make movies, originally Paramount wanted there to be a straight man. They wanted a heartthrob. Somebody to get the girl.
Yeah.
And it couldn't be Harpo, it couldn't be Groucho, and it couldn't be Chico, because they had their characters.
Yeah.
So Zeppo was relegated to be the straight man and to be like the heartthrob who gets the girl. And according to the other brothers, it really was a bit of a tragedy because he was very, very funny. Yeah. And in their vaudeville acts, Zeppo's shtick was everything he'd say would rhyme. That was his shtick.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It would have been cool to see.
Yeah. So they sort of like robbed us of that. And there's one regret of the Marx Brothers that I have, which is in the 70s, Dick Cavett, who had Groucho on a lot, wanted to try to have Zeppo on. And Zeppo requested like a ridiculous amount of money.
Oh.
Yeah.
Probably because he really didn't want to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what it felt like. It was less of an ego and more of like, I really don't want to do this.
Yeah. Some actors do that when they're trying to turn down a role. Instead of just turning it down outright, they say, I want a ridiculous amount of money.
Exactly, yeah.
So they never, there's like no, there's no interview with Zeppo. There's like nothing, and to add an extra little like thorn to the story, is that as Dick Cavett was speaking with Zeppo over the phone, Zeppo says to him, he goes, "Oh, I got Marx Brothers stories that no one's ever heard, but too bad." You know, like, he tantalized them. I was like, "No, I'm not doing it." So that was interesting. But, oh yeah, go ahead.
Just one team that we forgot to mention, that one, Martin and Lewis. Because they relied a lot on that, on the old, handsome guy sang the song, got the girl, and tell the joke, and when you said about his him being Gumbo being the heartthrob.
Yeah. Zeppo, yeah.
Zeppo being the heartthrob.
No, it is the same dynamic.
Yeah.
So, like, from the Marx Brothers, so you brought it up perfectly. So you have Groucho, and I feel like Harpo, too, pushed the limits of what now is political correctness.
Yeah.
Groucho with his one-liners, and the fact that in just about every Marx Brothers movie, Harpo is literally chasing a girl.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know what he's going to do when he gets her, because he never catches her. But we can imagine. So, naturally, a lot of political correctness has seeped into comedy. As of 2020, there are a lot of comedians being canceled just for their material. Comedians like Jerry Seinfeld are being shunned out of colleges based on their material. Mm-hmm. Jerry Seinfeld being shunned for his material.
The guy who is
the safest comedian.
Exactly.
So,
you can't get much safer than Jerry Seinfeld, folks.
Right. So with all that said, in your guys' opinion, I know my opinion. So for you guys, what do you think about political correctness in comedy? Where do you guys see as artists and got people involved in film and students of comedy? Where do you feel like the line is, and now have we gone too far?
Okay. I don't think it's necessarily that we've gone too far. I think it's that intention is being misconstrued.
Okay.
So, just for example, since you mentioned Martin, the Dean Martin Celebrity Roast is rife with jokes that would not fly today. Like you will never find a show today where you could have Foster Brooks come on to roast Muhammad Ali and say, I was Muhammad's trainer, and when I first met him, he was white. Because when I turn a man into a world-class athlete, I go all the way. It's like, now...
don't lose your thought, but the roast of Sammy Davis Jr.
Yeah.
Where Milton Berle says, he goes out and goes, when Sammy Davis was a boy, he was rocked to sleep in a hollowed out watermelon. You know?
Oh, anything that those guys did. Well, their Vegas act, Sinatra, Martin, and
Davis.
Davis, yeah, they that's one of the things. That was one of their biggest things. At one point, Dean Martin would put Sammy Davis in as junior and say, "We got a president here from the AANCP."
Now, the reason those jokes flew back then is that people understood the intention. They weren't actually, like Foster Brooks, for example, wasn't actually saying you have to be black to be a world-class athlete. He was mocking the stereotype.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And today, the problem with so many young viewers who are canceling even the safest comedians is that they don't get that. They think that they're enforcing the stereotype instead of mocking it. They think they're joking. Oh yeah, it's true. You have to be black to be a world-class comedian. It's like, no. Or to be a world-class athlete, rather. And it's like, no. So I think the intention has been lost in translation. People are so sensitive. People are so... people want to be offended because these days the easiest way to get to feel empowered is to say, this offends me or that offends me, and then everybody has to cater to your fragile little needs.
Right.
So if people would just if the whole world, and again, this is all subjective, just my opinion, but I think if people who watch comedy in general would learn to loosen up and look past the surface level interpretation of, oh, he's making fun of black people, or oh, he's making fun of white people. No, I think they're making fun of the stereotype. Oh, that's actually kind of funny. I appreciate that. Continue. I think we could get away with more political incorrectness, and it could go back to being the norm, and we would have better comedy in general.
Yeah.
Because comedy, that should be a safe zone.
Yes.
Excuse me, if I can use that expression. I mean,
comedy is how we cope with pain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, when all this stuff is going on in the world, what do? I turn on the comedy.
Yes.
To cheer myself up.
You know a perfect example of that. Do you know why? Do you know what was the highest grossing movie the year that JFK was assassinated? It's a mad, 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 mad world.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody rushed to the theater to see that comedy to get over his assassination.
Mm-hmm. Well, movies in general have that power, but comedies especially. I mean, when my grandparents passed away, what did I do? It might not have been the most therapeutic or most, but I watched comedy movies. I watched the movies that I would watch with them. That's
right. When my mother passed, I got into Curb Your Enthusiasm. Now, at the time, your mind and your soul just leads you places sometimes. And I really didn't go, I want to watch a new comedy thing. No. But like I said, it leads you places, and so I completely understand. I ended up finding a new show and loving it. And it inadvertently was taking my mind off emotional pain. And that's another show that would be very non-politically correct.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I think that if you go back to think about vaudeville, now, Andrew and Italian, okay? I have a little Italian in me. So, by today's standards, you should be offended by Chico Marx. I'm just saying, if we were to split it up. So if we go back to vaudeville, everybody was being made fun of.
Oh yeah. It was. They made fun of the Irish, the Italians.
Yeah, everybody. They took the stereotypes and they turned them on their head.
Yeah. You can say the Irish drink and fight. The Italians cook and have marry beautiful women.
Right. And crime.
and are connected to the mafia. Yeah.
Jewish people are cheap.
Yeah.
Every white bald person's a Nazi.
Yeah. And just so you know, guys, when you leave the water, $2.
I rest my case. Polish people are stupid. Where are we again?
They say the Italians too.
Yeah. Well, my favorite. All right, let's just go there.
Sure, why not?
Somebody told me this joke, and it killed me. And it's so simple, which is what's the difference between the Italians and the Jews? The only difference is better shoes.
Wow.
Alright, let me go one more.
Sure, yes, please.
This is a true story. But somebody said this to me, and I let them go. Because I really want to. Maybe we'll cut this out. I don't know. But I gotta say it now. So, let's see. I'll keep the names out to protect the innocent. An older lady I was sitting at a table with her, and we were talking, and she got on the topic of Jewish people. And I was like, oh boy. Let's see. And I didn't say nothing. I just let her go. And she threw a line at me that I think is gold. And I don't know where she got it. but she was cutting string beans at the time. With her, she had like, I don't know if you experience a lot of old Italian women, they'd grow their thumbnail long, they'd cut the string beans. My grandmother did it. And it's like you feed the string bean through your hand. She's put the string bean down, and she goes, "I'm gonna tell you." She goes, "The Jews, they pinch it a penny so hard, head and tails end up on the same side."
That is gold.
Oh, wow.
I was like, wow, that's terrible. But it's funny.
Okay, I got one for you.
Okay.
So, unfortunately, the people listening to this podcast can't see my face, but I have a pretty big nose.
They've turned it off by now.
I have, again, not mentioning names in order to protect the innocent.
Mm-hmm.
I was once in a community theater production where another actor who I didn't know quite as well at the time asked me if I was Jewish, and I had to tell him no. I was born and raised Christian, but and he was pretty embarrassed after he asked. I was like, "It's the nose, isn't it?" And he's like, "Yeah."
I got one like that. Again, not mentioning any names. A person that we may all know asked me if I was Samoan.
Okay.
And
That's like unique. That's a curveball.
and I was just like I said to somebody like it's because of my size and my tan skin, and I said, "Yep."
Wow.
That's unique though. Like,
Yeah,
that's almost a compliment.
I said, I don't have curly hair.
You should have been like, "Oh yeah, me and Dwight Johnson, we're homies."
Yeah, we're me and him are like this.
All us Samoans, we all know each other.
We're all we're a big family. Yokozuna and Akishi.
What was that kid's movie? It was a little girl who controlled the water.
Oh, Moana. No?
And there was like a big guy.
Oh, yeah, Dwayne Johnson playing Maui, the demigod.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, next time. Say, oh, yeah.
I was the inspiration.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they just gave him longer hair.
They just gave him longer
it's
hair.
It's me. Like, you watch that movie. Like, I gave them my life rights.
Just put me in a grass skirt and
Yeah. At least they didn't ask. All right, here we go. At least they didn't ask you, aren't you the guy who sings Somewhere Over the Rainbow?
oh, that guy.
Then they deserve a smack.
Yeah, then you give him a smack.
Yeah. I only said it because I'm not in arm's length. So yeah, we've completely devolved from all the intellectual things we were talking about.
And if we want to go back to all those great comedy teams, comedians, and things like that.
Yeah.
This is just a side note for for our people. I know we all know this, but they provided humor for millions of people. They made millions of movies and shorts and things like that. Mm-hmm. They were paid horribly. At the end of it, Abbot Costello were. The IRS just destroyed them.
Which was one of the reasons they split.
Yeah, because that's the only way they could make money, because they couldn't make money as a team, or they couldn't afford to stay together. The Three Stooges. They made so many more movies, but they were only paid. It might sound like a lot of money. $20,000 a piece, but for all the stuff that they did, for all the theater performances, all the shorts, they were only paid $20,000 a year.
Yeah.
And then they weren't. Then they got gypped out of when they started, streaming their projects.
So I think what you're saying, and I feel the same way, is that over time, comedy hasn't been taken seriously.
Yeah.
To use some weird words together. Yeah. But, it always just was a little bit more of a throwaway. And the drama, Humphrey Bogart, that ilk, they got the credit and the riches in more ways than one. And the recognition.
Yes.
Exactly.
And whereas comedians didn't get it as much.
No.
Buster Keaton ended up in the 60s in Beatnik Beach movies. I don't know if you've ever seen, but he was just like those 60s beach party movies that were just like bathing suit movies, really.
Yeah.
And they throw an old has-been, quote unquote, in there. And so Buster Keaton was in a lot of those movies, and he would talk, and you just go like, oh. Because a lot of these guys, Harpo included, their voice ruined the act.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd heard the story about Harpo that he originally talked during the act, and a critic destroyed him, saying the act was great until he spoke.
Yeah.
So he made that part of his act. He just didn't talk.
Yeah.
Although there was another alleged reason. I don't know if you heard about the story with the fire.
The fire.
Oh, okay. So this was. So one was the story was the critic, but the other one, I don't know if this actually happened, but supposedly, when they were working in vaudeville, they were working with this one really crooked theater manager who kept postponing and procrastinating, actually paying them what he owed them, and finally, just as they were about to catch their train, he finally paid them their salary in pennies, nickels, and dimes. And they didn't have to, because they had to catch the train, they didn't have time to go to the bank to change it for dollars. So they had to lug these huge bags of coins to the train. Right. And as they were leaving, Harpo turned around and yelled, "I hope your theater burns to the ground." And that night,
it did to the ground.
Yeah. So from that point on, Groucho said, from that point on, Harpo's voice is the fire axe that you keep in the back of the theater to be used only in case of emergency.
I have not heard that one. That's pretty fun.
I've heard stories like that before, but I never heard that one specifically.
Yeah.
Wow. So in closing to wrap up this episode, I like let's do our recommendations deal.
Yeah.
Throw some comedy movies at everybody.
Okay, I'll start with my all-time personal favorite comedy is Blake Edwards' The Great Race. Blake Edwards is, I think, my favorite comedy director of all time. He did the Pink Panther movies, What Did You Do in the War, Daddy, Breakfast at Tiffany's, and so on. But The Great Race, to me, is probably the closest you'll get to a live-action feature-length Looney Tune cartoon. If you think of Tony Curtis's character, the Great Leslie, as a sort of hybrid of Bugs Bunny and the Roadrunner, that he's perfect, flawless leading man. And then you have the villain, Professor Fate, played to perfection by Jack Lemmon, whose character is basically a hybrid of Daffy Duck and Wile E. Coyote, always playing second fiddle to the hero who's dressed in white. Mm-hmm. And of course you have Natalie Wood, who turned everything she touched into gold. Peter Falk, who oddly enough, in real life, didn't think he was funny, but was actually hilarious. Hilarious score by Henry Mancini. Some great slapstick comedy. Some unapologetic slapstick comedy. And probably the most undeserved Oscar win for best sound mixing ever, because all the sounds were, because it's a Warner Brothers movie, were ripped straight from Looney Tune cartoons. Mm-hmm. And they don't sound the least bit convincing, but it just makes all the slapstick comedy that much funnier. It's just a movie about these two rival daredevil stuntmen in a car race in the early 1900s from New York to Paris, and all the countries that they stopped along the way. There's plenty of politically incorrect humor, I'm sure, especially with mocking stereotypes of the day. Mm-hmm. And Jack Lemmon especially is one of my favorite, in that movie as Professor Fate, is one of my all-time favorite characters of any movie ever, and certainly one of the best villains. So Blake Edwards, The Great Race. Look it up.
Okay, nice. Andrew.
I'm going to go with one that's, I feel it's very underrated. This is one, everybody, where you have to ignore all the Rotten Tomatoes and stuff like that. It's called Father's Day with Robin Williams and Billy Crystal.
Okay.
Two comedic geniuses, who just, it was one of their, they worked together on the stage. They did a lot of stage work for charities and things like that with Whoopi Goldberg. But this was the first movie, and I think the only movie they ever did together. And you have Billy Crystal's great dry humor. He's as a straight man. You have Robin Williams and his zaniness, and they just both even each other out. The story is about, they're both told that they have a son that they've never heard about. This woman comes to both of them. I can't think of the actress's name, but she goes to Billy Crystal and says, you have a son. He's 17 years old, and he's lost somewhere in San Francisco following a rock band, and I need you to find him. And he's, and Billy Crystal, his character is a lawyer. He's very serious, and he's very skeptical. Then you have Robin Williams, his character, who is a failed writer, and this is actually kind of sad saying this, but his character is about to commit suicide.
Okay.
And then he gets a call from this woman. He has a gun in his mouth. He's just like, hello? And he's just like, how are you? Well, me, I'm not bad. And he's just like, oh, I have a son, yay! Mm-hmm. So they're both on different levels. And Ramos was just, I have to find him. Billy Crystal, maybe. But then also they have that sense of responsibility. And then they meet up and they just work together so well. And it's that's why I consider it underrated, because it's one of the only times you get to see them act together. And they were such best friends, and you can see that in the movie. Mm-hmm. Because they really were friends in real life. And like I said, you have to ignore the because I think it has like a 0 rating or something. But it's one of those movies that you just watch and you just laugh. You see them because it's two friends just trying to make each other laugh. And they both work well together, and the story is a little off the rail, but I'm suggesting it. I'm recommending it strictly just to see Billy Crystal and Robin Williams work together.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Nice. Cool. Isaac, you got anything?
Yeah, I must say, The Party again would probably be the only comedy I've watched in quite a while. So yeah, I would recommend giving that a listen. It's pretty good. Just Peter Sellers running around, making hell for all the hoity-toity Hollywood types. Pretty good. Yeah, it's definitely a gem of the 70s or whatever that era.
Yeah.
So yeah, give it a watch. It's cool.
So I've been sitting here thinking about which way I'm going to go, and I'm going to stick with my original plan of going with 1968 movie Skidoo with Jackie Gleason, Groucho Marx, Carol Channing, and Mickey Rooney, and a whole bunch of other people. In a nutshell, Jackie Gleason is a retired gangster who gets pulled into one more thing on a ship, and it's a prison ship. So Jackie Gleason has to go undercover on a prison ship run by God, who's played by Groucho Marx. And
oh my god, that concept alone is awesome.
And if that isn't enough, you get Frankie Avalon is also in it, and you get a very titillating yet disturbing Carol Channing strip scene. Because why not? The soundtrack is great. I think it's Henry Nielsen who did a lot of soundtracks back then. And it's a very strange movie. And I think it might also be on YouTube for folks to check it out there for free. Other than that, it might be hard to find. But I think it's on YouTube. I'm pretty sure. But yes, Skidoo, 1968. Thank you guys for coming on this episode and talking comedy.
Of course.
And I look forward to having you on again soon.
Whatever that is.
Well, yeah,
Whenever that may be.
Wherever you want us,
Yeah.
we'll be here.
All right. Thank you guys again. We'll catch you next time. Thank you, everybody, for listening to another episode of the Planet Shivers podcast. Thank you again for Luke, Andrew, and Isaac for being on this show. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. You could find this episode and more on all major podcast platforms and YouTube with video. Next episode is going to be a guest who's just as good, so don't miss it. And take care of yourself and take care of somebody else. Be well. Enjoy yourself.